Welcome to this audio session recording taken at the Agroforestry Show, which was organised in September 2023 as a partnership between the Woodland Trust and the Soil Association. For more session recordings, go to agroforestryshow.com or explore and subscribe to the Agroforestry Show YouTube channel. Enjoy!
So I'm going to be chairing the session, so it's my job to introduce you to everybody that's up here and just say a few words, and then I'll be just keeping an eye on the timing. So just to let you know who I am, my name is Bianca Ambrose-Oji, and I work for Forest Research. I don't do research on trees, I'm a social scientist, so I'm always out there trying to understand more about the farming community, woodland managers and others, and how they relate to trees, I suppose you could say. So I'll just introduce the experts that we have on the panel today who are going to be interacting with you. And just to start off by saying we've got representatives here from the agricultural community, the tree care community and the forestry community, so it's a real collaborative effort, which is what the show is all about. So I'm going to start off on the very far end. So this is Elliot. Elliot, would you like to say something into the microphone about yourself?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm a social scientist working in the Society Environment Research Group. So very much the same as Bianca, working with a lot of land managers and farmers. Out of curiosity, who here is a land manager or a farmer? Okay, that's really good to see. So yeah, we're going to have some interactive exercises today, and my role today really is just going to be observing, seeing how the session goes, getting some of your feedback on this, because it's all about facilitating the transfer of knowledge and be able to sort of encourage action for tree health behaviours.
Thanks. Next in line is Peter.
Hello, I'm Peter Wilderspin. I'm a rural surveyor and I manage Cambridge University's rural estate.
Thanks. Ross?
Hello there, I'm Ross Guyton. I'm the Woodland Division Manager for a company called Oakbank. Oakbank are a nature conservation, ecology, stewardship and habitat advisory company. We're based in Huntingdon. As I say, I'm the Woodland Division Manager. There's 5 of us based all across East Anglia, East Midlands, and we assist landowners, institutional clients such as Cambridge University, in managing their woodland assets and their individual tree assets, which brings into that tree risk management. Great,
thanks. Ian?
Hello, I'm Ian Turner and I work for the Tree Council. I'm an arboriculturalist and I have a small amount of background in farming and agriculture, but for the most part I'm specialise in ash dieback and technical guides on how we might respond to that.
Great, thanks Ian. And then Eleanor.
Hi everybody, I'm Eleanor. I'm a technical officer at LEAF, Linking Environment and Farming, and I'll be here today to just introduce the activities that are coming up. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, great, thanks very much. So I'll just hand over to Eleanor then, who's going to take you through the session, which is not us talking at you. It will be us circulating amongst you and getting you to ask your questions and work through what is this thing called tree health? And what does it mean to me, and what do I need to know about it? Okay, thanks.
Great, just to kick off, I'm going to start with what's in front of you on the tables. So, first thing I want you to do is find the black stickers on the table in front of you, and each person, if you could just rate on a scale of not very confident to very confident, how you're at with managing tree health issues at the moment. Have we all done that? It's just that first step. So if we just come back to the front here quickly, I'll let you know what that's all for. The aim of the game is to really, hopefully, see whether that point on that scale changes by the end of this session. And if it has, we'd love to know why, and if it hasn't, then we'd love to know why even more. Moving on, we've been through introductions, so I can jump through that. So the kit list in front of you, I know it probably looks like a lot of bits of paper, but everything has a purpose. You've got your Farmer's Guide to Ash Dieback. You've also got within your pack the activities, and at the back you've got a map as well as a feedback form. The numbers are 1 to 4, and it's a bit of an auction kind of vibe when it comes to showing the answers to particular questions that we're going to work through, so don't worry, you won't accidentally buy a boat or anything, I promise. And then, scale and stickers, and then hopefully you've all got a pen or a pencil each to make some edits and things like that. So, I just want to start really with why is tree health relevant in agroforestry. Agroforestry involves trees. Trees get sick for multiple different amounts of reasons, and they, in their own forms, depending on their location, present a different amount of risk. So managing tree health is really important in agroforestry settings, no matter what setting that may be. So this session is mainly about trees that might be existing on your farm, and trees that you might be in control of at the moment or in the future. So the main aim of the workshop is to improve your confidence with managing tree health issues, enabling you to take a proactive and proportionate management approach. So by proactive, we mean that general awareness, so you understand what you're looking for and what responses you might need to make. And proportionate really means making sure that it's proportionate to the amount of risk that tree provides. So we don't want to initiate any scaremongering around ash dieback or other tree health diseases, because there is still value for them in the landscape where they can be left to remain. So just to set the scene even more, provide a little bit of detail, we're going to go through some tree health indicators, which is going to take you down the different layers of the tree and what you have to look at. So I'm going to pass the mics over to Ross and Ian, and I'll do the clicker.
Thank you very much. So we understand, what a tree looks like, and when we approach a tree, we need to be obviously fully aware of the context when we're approaching it, but we're just going to break it down for you when you're looking at a tree, what parts it helps to understand that you will be looking at first. So the crown condition there, and the trunk condition, and the base root, and down below, what we're actually looking for on those individual parts. So with the crown condition, looking at this tree, the previous slide please.
Sorry.
So looking at this tree, this is an oak tree, and I think you can tell that it's not well, and it is suffering from low vitality, we call it, so it's actually not that healthy. And then with that, you've got to think, well, that should trigger a thought about, well, why is it of low vitality? So really, to help you go through a process, it just means that you don't just focus just on the crown, you're looking at the whole tree, you're looking at it holistically. So go down from the top of the tree with the crown condition, and what's it looking like, how thin is it, how dense is that foliage? Then going down into the trunk condition, is there anything that is on that trunk that might trigger you thinking that's not normal? And what is that going to imply in the condition, the safety, the sort of where that tree's going with its health? And then with the base and the root plate condition, we're looking for not just actually the structure itself, we're not just looking for whether it's complete, we're also looking for things like fungi, and we're looking for signs that there may be some weakness in the structure of that tree. Ross?
So essentially what we're looking at in the first instance is obviously the crown condition and the biodensity that you've got within it. I think the key thing to start going back exactly what was said a minute ago is, it sounds a bit silly, but you really need to know what a good healthy tree looks like in order to be able to then identify what an abnormal or unhealthy tree looks like. And you've got, classic examples there of certainly the one in the middle of a dead tree, which is sycamore with sooty bark disease, and you've got the same image of the oak on the right-hand side, but the one on the left is ash. You can see it's not looking great. The leaf density is low, but it's not as dense as it should be. And so really that in the first instance, the first two are obviously the middle and the right-hand one are absolutely obvious, but you're still looking for subtle changes to the one, such as the one on the left. So coming back down the tree, so you've now got the trunk, the bark changes, fungi and lesions. The image on the left is again sooty bark disease, and what you're seeing there is the fungal spores from the fungus that once the bark has been removed, you can see again it's abnormal. You wouldn't expect to see that. The image in the middle is a fungus, cetroporus, I think. Again, abnormal. That's really all we're sort of trying to identify to you at the moment is you're looking for something that doesn't look like a normal tree. And the one on the right-hand side is lesions. You can see the black lesions on that oak tree. That's common signs of acute oak decline. At this stage, we're not expecting you to go away from this, understanding that you can identify sooty bark disease, or that's cetroporus, or indeed that's acute oak decline. It's really about understanding what a normal tree looks like, and therefore you can see what an abnormal tree looks like.
Thanks. So here we got a couple of examples of where that abnormality might then lead to sort of change, and particularly the sort of change that might lead to full tree failure. And you need to just spot them early enough and be aware of them. It doesn't mean that there's something that's going to happen instantaneously. It's just something that it might be progressing to a point where you might need to seek some help. But with the actual, how serious is this, and what does this imply for this tree? Now, obviously, these are examples of what you get at the base of a tree. There's wind throw, which has been caused by potentially Myrtillus. I can't really see around there, so I shall come out and have a look. So it's like that's an example of where, and if people can see the images, you can see there is maybe some fruiting bodies there, but more than anything, it's an example of where you see the entire outer part of that, what is a plate or a root plate, has actually decayed, and the tree has then failed. And there are some warning signs for that, which you can see down in that right-hand picture there. You get a fungus which is at the base of the tree on the ground, and you'll see that seasonally. And just keeping your eyes open for what looks like something that might imply some extra risk from that failure. And that's Fomentarius, I think, in there. Yep, in the middle there. And that's just where you might get some brittle snap of that stem, so it might break. But to be honest, most of these trees, it's down to we know where they are more than anything else, which we'll come on to.
If I might, I'll just add that is indeed a Myrtillus wind throw on the left-hand image, and the two images on the right are examples of the fungal fruity bodies that you will see.
Yeah.
Both of those are located relatively near to the base of the tree, but with Myrtillus, because it is essentially a basal area and a root decay fungus, you can find it some distance away. And just look at the left image. I mean, that was a significant beech tree, and you can see how very little root structure and how much root integrity was left after the decay fungus had done its work.
But the one thing to bear in mind is that our top-down approach, some of these fungi that decay the root plate, they still leave the tree with some ground condition, and that's where you need to keep your eyes on the ground. And that's why splitting it down and not just overly focusing on the crown is really important. It's also got a great name, giant polypore, so just in case you wanted a common name.
Great, thank you. So don't worry, the first activity isn't going to be a test of your Latin or fungal name skills. It is just going to be, gauging your how you perceive a tree. And with this focus, it's going to be on the crown. While that isn't your sole focus, it's for the sake of this activity. So using page 8 and 9 of the Ash Dieback guide as your cheat sheet, and then also using the numbers that you've got that are going to correspond to the class system in the guide. We're going to go through a few pictures, and if you just can hold up the number that corresponds with how healthy you think that tree is, then we'll get started on that. Right, the first tree, we've seen it before, seen it already. So if you look at the class system on those pages, if you want to hold up what class system you think it's at, it's looking a bit sorry for itself. Okay, I see a lot of 4s, and that's that one. 1, 3. Okay, that's optimistic for it. Poor thing, it is a 4. It is what the Tree Council. This part of the scale has been developed from the Tree Council, and something we've taken into this guide. It's so nice and visual. That's pretty sick tree. So here's the next one. This is a ash tree, and that is class 2. So if anybody wasn't sure, because the illustration is obviously not going to represent every single tree, think about perhaps that percentage value of vitality that's in the tree. As a little clue for the next one. So this is Ash Dieback again on a roadside, which is a bit precarious. So that one would be, class 3. So well done, everyone. Are there any questions so far? How it's going? No? Okay. Well, if there are any, just stick your hand up. We can get to you. This next one. So this is showing something called pom-pomming, which isn't very celebratory, really, for its health.
It's not very broccoli.
Yeah. This is ash as well.
It's difficult with the percentages because they will express it very differently. This is your image that you're seeing in front of you is an average, and it's on a sliding scale, and it's very easy to see it on that paper. But when you actually see them, you can see the variation in that crown condition. You see it's quite dense in places and quite thin in others. So what does that say to you about the percentage? Is that you can't give it an overall percentage, it's very hard to. So it's just an average.
Yeah, this has actually got the most mixed response I've seen. Yeah, there's 3s, there's 4s, there's 2s as well. So yeah, a tricky one. Yeah, are there any sort of justifications for that? Maybe why there was a bit of confusion or different results?
Yeah, with the classes, it is really just like this is your way in to getting a percentage. Because remember that, if you're looking at it, you can't see some things on this tree from this photo. You won't see the peripheral twigs that are dead on the ends of those branches. And you won't see what's died. So, this is a bit of a funny measure, trying to measure something that's not there, isn't it? Something that's missing. So really what you're doing is you're probably going the other way. You're probably thinking, well, what can I see and what would I imagine is the outline of that tree? We haven't really put up a healthy tree as such.
Don't give it away.
Oh, no. But should you think about it, if you want to lodge something in your head, think about a tree that is healthy has a smooth outline. It's very broccoli-like, but it's more smooth. Anyway.
Brings me on to our last one, just to end on a positive note. Yay! They're not all dying.
There is one healthy one.
Yeah. This is a lovely oak tree that I walked past a few weeks ago, which the cows are enjoying, which is very agroforestry appropriate. Lovely. Number 1, fantastic.
It's important to remember that this exercise is purely allowing you to be able to identify or consider the extent of decline and potential, the declining condition of the tree. And this is really because of the onset of ash dieback, and effectively we haven't had a large pandemic, if you want to call it, within the tree world since the 70s, which was Dutch elm disease. And so really, tree health up until the last 10 years, since we've had Dutch acute oak, ash dieback, has really been down to the professional world. We've been the ones that, whilst we haven't been using these four examples, we've been doing it professionally. The reason that this is now being brought out is to be able to assist landowners, farmers, in order just to try and work out how poor they think their trees may be.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, well done, everybody. Flying colours. All passed. You can all leave this tent. Proud of yourselves. Okay, so I'm just wondering, opening the room for our next activity, if there are any questions, any queries? No? Okay.
Does it make entire sense? Are you feeling like you're a bit more confident that you could look at a tree and say, I could have a go at percentage?
Yeah. Got a question at the back there.
Jesus. Are there any species that don't particularly follow those rules that would catch us out?
I think, that example of Myripilus, sometimes you get not a tree disease, but a fungi which can cause decay and keep the crown can retain leaf, and then that can catch you out. But in terms of other species, we're talking about pests really, and normally it follows for the most part, I'm not going to say everything, but for the most part, you'd be looking at that crown condition. It's like most plants, you can see when they're unhealthy, wilting, discoloured. There will be other signs as well. And if you've got the fruiting bodies, that's a winner, if you can look out for those. So, yes, you're right, there are some, but they're limited. So.
The only thing I'd add is this isn't really attributable to conifers. It's only really for deciduous trees.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, that's a great question too. Right, moving on to activity number 2. So in your work pack, you're going to have a map of Madingley Estate. So I'll just quickly introduce the activity, and then I'll pass it over to Peter. So this is all about highlighting risk zones, so where those trees are and the risks that they may be presenting according to their health to people, to property, roads, and any other kind of features in the landscape. The case study we're using is Madingley Estate, which is where Peter's based. So he's going to give us a little bit of context about the map in front of you. So just to say, there's a small map in the pack, but if you go right to the back, there's an A4 version. So that's the one you can edit. So if you all find the A4 version, then it'll be a lot easier to see. And use your pencils just to circle, highlight, annotate what you'd think is a medium risk zone and what's a high risk zone. And the pages you can use for your cheat sheet here are page 10 and 11 of the Ash Dieback Guide. So a lot of info in one go. Sorry if it's a bit of a kerfuffle.
And so just to elaborate on that, what you're looking at is those maps in the context of potential tree risk in terms of tree population. So you're effectively looking at there's risk is only there if there's a target.
What's the target?
A target would be human occupation, roads, footpaths, anything where that tree, should it fail, causes damage to.
It sounds quite brutal, doesn't it? Target, like you're being targeted. But
Sorry, it's not very clear on the thingy, but Peter, I think you'll be able to provide a bit more detail for everybody.
Absolutely. Whilst a philosopher might ask you whether a branch falling in an empty wood makes a noise, the answer as a land manager is clearly I don't care. It's not going to cause me any paperwork or create any aggravation. What we're looking at here is where we're actually going to be looking properly for tree health issues, which is where there's a chance that there is a target that might be affected by the branch. I'll just give you a bit of context because not everything's clear on the map in your pack. This is a small village called Madingley just outside Cambridge, where Cambridge University Farm is based. Madingley Hall is marked on the map. That's used for whole life education, short courses, gardens open to the public, conferences, events, that sort of thing. The green dotted lines are permissive paths, so they're places where we allow public access. There's a footpath that doesn't show up clearly between what you'll see as Madingley Wood and the Cambridge American Cemetery. And in the centre of the village here, we've got the village playground and allotments that the university are responsible for the trees on. So that probably, with what's on the map, gives you the information that you need to start to consider where the high risks are, where the medium risks are, and where you're going to be looking to check your trees regularly.
If it helps, as another cheat sheet, we've got that purple barrier, and so you'll be wanting to look in the geographically sort of western side of that map. It's where you might want to focus a little bit on.
I think the one thing to add as well is that you need to assume, because you can't see, obviously, you don't know, you haven't got an intimate knowledge of the estate, and this exercise is normally done by someone who knows the estate well, so you won't know what the tree population's like there. I think for this exercise, you need to assume there's trees along all the footpaths, along the roads, and take it from there. You're looking at the usage more than anything.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So I still see some people doing some high risk, medium risk editing. You can continue if you want. I'm really sorry I'm going to stick the answers up in just a second. So just to recap on some of the key things, a lot of it's going to be considering, thanks to that little extra page in the guide, things that you should be considering is footfall, so whether it's a road, whether it's a path. I mean, people like Peter and landowners and tenants and farmers might know exactly the scale in which that footpath is used, which is going to depend on how you risk assess it yourself. So don't worry if you've been really risk averse and put high risk everywhere. That's understandable, and same with medium risk. But it's really just to get you thinking about what zones you might have on the land that you work as well. And just a few little, I've mentioned it to a few people around the room, so sorry if I've neglected some of you. But the little trees on the side were kind of clues that while there aren't trees on the map, there are hedgerow trees that have been identified by the people who work that land, so that context is really important. We're going to come around now with the answers.
The importance of this exercise is, as a landowner or manager, understanding your tree population, identifying the trees that may pose a risk. I know this is all seen a bit negative, but they may pose a risk, and that's so you can put your limited resources to keeping an eye on those and forgetting about the rest. And the reason we're looking at identifying higher risk areas and medium risk areas is because this is the first part of the process. The next part of the process is keeping an eye on those trees in those locations. And so trees around footpaths, which we'll see here, pose genuinely a lesser risk because someone needs to be under that tree at the point of it failing, whereas if it's next to an A road, cars are travelling at 50, 60 miles an hour and just won't have the time in order to react to a fallen tree or a fallen limb. And so those trees that we've identified here will need checking, will need looking at periodically, and this allows you to say, okay, well, the high-risk area trees we need to look at more frequently, and the medium trees less so. But effectively, it then still allows you as a manager once a year to go, okay, what do I need to be looking at now? That's the key point of this exercise.
Cool.
Another point just to make is this is an answer, not necessarily the answer, because things change over time. And it's important that once you draw these things, they don't get set in stone, they are pulled out and looked at periodically to refresh them. Because what your neighbours are doing with land that's underneath or next to your trees may change, and that may impact on what you feel you need to check and survey as time goes on.
Similarly, as you quite rightly say, Peter, this is a snapshot in time. And I always say to clients, that woodland area that you can see just south of the hall, I think it's just south of the hall, no, west of the hall, is just really got footpath through it. But ultimately, all of a sudden, if the university decided to hold an annual festival in there, then that would absolutely change the use of that area, and therefore the need to obviously keep an eye on your trees.
I had an interesting question from somebody in the audience, and a quite proactive question, which is, we're focused so much on the kind of clearly visible signs and the risk zones that we identify around falling trees and such like, but what about things like the underground risks of root creep and issues around flooding and damage to infrastructure? How would you go about monitoring that proactively?
Largely you can't, not on such a large scale. This is predominantly all about declining trees with a view to risks of things above ground. Most of the time, the only way you'd know about any sort of underground infrastructure problems is when they arise.
Usually when they're digging them up, and that's when the actual risk arises as well.
I think there's something to be said as well for simply mapping as an activity, as a desk-based exercise in what I think Ross has mentioned is sort of your mind's eye. You know the land, you know what is there, and simply highlighting it on paper might help bring your attention back to that particular issue that you want to review again later. So whether that is flooding or other issues, it's obviously going to be a lot harder in terms of what's happening on what's going on underground. But as a simple starting point, Peter, I don't know how you found this whole mapping exercise for you and your management on site, but I think it's really vital for a range of different activities that you might want to be doing with your trees and with other things. So Peter, have you got anything to add to that at all?
Yes, I mean this is actually the second version. We first started going down this risk zoning route about 3 years ago. Various things have changed on the estate, so we've gone through and rezoned it again. Really, the question that comes out of this then is how often you're going to survey the different zones, and probably Ross is best placed to comment on that one.
Again, there's no absolute fixed rhyme and reason. This always, tree risk management is always specific to specific sites. Here, because of the large footfall, this is just west of Cambridge. Lots of people, lots of activity, lots of road usage. The high-risk areas we're inspecting at a detailed level, so that's effectively at an arboricultural level every 2 years, and the medium risk have been looked at every 3 years. But what we've done in order, some landowners, some estates insist upon looking at trees every year, which we do for some of our clients, particularly if they've got open gardens on big estates and things like that, and they have a large amount of people for a short period of time, then it warrants it. But what we also do, in order to allow those to be every 2 or every 3 years, is Peter and his staff also go around in interim in between those periods and do checks and just drive around and make sure everything's fine. And that is particularly important after inclement weather. If you've had a storm event or something like that, every landowner really should spend however long it takes, not very long, driving around their estate and make sure there aren't any still hung up branches, split trees or anything like that will become a hazard. Because tree risk is very much down to nowadays, was it foreseeable? In the old days, people used to say, it was an act of God. Well, actually, an act of God, there's only one that really the law courts fully recognise, and that's a lightning strike, because most others are normally as an action or inaction of a human being. So if a tree blows over, the chances are, whilst the wind was the final point, it would have probably had a wood decay fungus, it would have been cracked, it would have had a cavity, and at that point, that's when the insurance companies start getting interested. So if it does blow over, rather than saying, that was wind, if it was rotten, they could argue if it was rotten and you'd looked at it, you would have picked that up, dealt with it before it blew over.
That's why it comes back to the signs and indicators. And what I didn't cover earlier, which is part of what Ross has just said, is when you drive around, do you see evidence of change? And do you see branches on the ground? Do you see other things on the ground that were in the tree, or early leaf loss or things like that? So it's about being aware, and your awareness is just very basically looking. And if you have looked, then you're more likely to pick it up, and you're going to be able to act, or at least be able to get advice, such as Ross's, to be able to help you. So if you don't know and there's something wrong, defer to a professional. It's an easier way, but you can still look, and this gives you a first start in that.
Lovely. Thank you. I'm just going to open up for any questions. People have any queries on why some... Yeah, go for it. Ross, do you want to pass?
Hello, yeah. Just on that, so I'm working with the Forestry Commission with tree health. Can, a cross-panel answer would be great on what your thoughts are on what looks like quite a good year for ash, generally, and then preemptive felling in forests, which are quite safe in terms of the zones that you're mentioning. Preemptive felling of ash, and then the applications of grants that we offer to restock. Is there something that you would say that would perhaps argue against that? Or I can understand the arguments for it in terms of the increasing risk and so on and so forth, but in terms of a forest pathology perspective or arboricultural perspective, what are the arguments against that?
That's a big question. I think there are many answers to that. If you're going to take a forestry approach, there's a different priority there. As a land manager, your priority in this case, with an outbreak which is causing an increase in tree risk, you're looking to manage that tree risk, and you're looking to be selective about where you manage it based on this exercise that we have just done. You can do that at home. With the forestry pathology and the decision making within forests about whether you should preemptively fell, we've seen different examples, haven't we, with larch and others where people have gone in very hard. It could be about price, it could be about lots of different things, but essentially a bottom line is risk. And I think we always default back to that from an arboricultural perspective. Financial risk is another thing. It's not included in an assessment when we're talking about this, because when you're thinking about it, that shouldn't come into it. Health and safety dictates that money should not be an object in that decision making. So just so you're clear on that. But on the forestry side, I don't agree with preemptive felling if you can avoid it, but it depends on the condition of that forest. And yes, there is going to be a good year this year because it's been colder and wetter. So you might even get a progression of the disease which is not symptomatic or, not actually progressive. You're not going from, maybe 75% to 50% in 1 year. You might find that it goes from 75% and then it goes down to 50% 1 year and then goes back up again. Because it's good conditions for the tree and because of infection rates dropping within the canopy. But, and this is a big but, actually, you might find that's a dead cat bounce because it's just conditions which are determining a better outcome of the canopy. So that's where the canopy condition, every year, if it goes back up to 75%, doesn't mean you take it off your list to look. It means that you keep it on your list to see how it's progressing. So ash really is it has been recommended 6 monthly. That seems a bit ridiculous, really, but it's just seasonal, looking for ash dieback. That's what you should be doing. So,
just quickly,
really quick.
I do both because I've got a chartered forester, chartered arboriculturalist. I'll talk to you after because I think Eleanor's keen to.
No, it's okay. I'm not really tall enough for this to kind of be a ominous presence to get us to move on, but that's okay. Thank you. And yeah, if anything you want to chase up, then catch us afterwards. On to our last activity. And from what we've all been talking about in terms of what it looks like, where it might be, the last thing we wanted to look at is what your responses might be and those options that you've got. So there's some really simple options, which is leaving the tree be. That should be your first thought. Can you do that? I mean, while it's dying, while it's infected, it's actually got a lot of habitat value. Can you remove the target? So that isn't necessarily removing people, but it's simply moving that access from that particular tree risk, so not mowing underneath it, stopping people picnicking, stopping people camping as well. I was going to check out that on the campsite here actually, and I think it seems it's all fine. As well as property, so car parking. So you've got choice without affecting the tree. In terms of other measures, you've got options such as reducing the tree crown, so taking away those dead limbs. And then your last measure, really, if you have to, is going to be removing the tree, so felling the tree in its entirety. But just the key things really is that there are a range of cheap options to consider. You don't have to, there's that sort of range of things to think about beforehand. And it's all about being proactive and taking those actions that are proportionate to the level of risk, which we've gone into great detail. So our last activity is our tree check steps. This is a little workflow, and the printout actually had the answers on it, hence why some people have got some great sticker jobs over the answers just to not make it as easy as it could be, which was you probably saw us doing a bit of arts and crafts yesterday, so that's what we were doing. But on your work packs, you've got options 1 to 4 on what those answers for the particular questions are going to be. So we're going to start with the top one and then just sort of work our way down the process map. So if everyone wants to give it a little read through, have a think about what answers, and maybe annotate what answers you'd want on each box, then that would be great. Right, so we're going to start from the top one. So going from the key question, is the tree declining? No. What have we got for that? So it's going to be a number situation again. Number 1, that's good. That is leave the tree be. This is something we added actually. It's a key point, so leave the tree be for now, but we'll get onto that in a second. So how severe is the decline? So low being class 1, still looks quite healthy. Medium, class 2, 3, it's on the way down. Class 4, unhealthy. So what do you think comes after that one? Fab. So is the tree in a hazardous location? So you've identified that tree that's declining. Where is it, and are you going to have to take action depending on what it might affect? So it does. It is in a hazardous location. What have we got for that next answer? Some 2s, some 4s, some 3s. This one's, you're right, it's a bit of an interchangeable one, but the one that we've got down is explore what remedial work is required to make it safe. So from here, you've found a tree that's declining, you know it's in a hazardous location, and now look at your options. So can you leave it be? Can you prune it? Do you have to fell it? And then the last one, hopefully we'll get it. Number 2, this is a bit of an overarching one really, but fantastic, everyone's nailed that, is seek professional help with the decision making. So in terms of remedial work, there's things you're going to have to consider before, as a result of that decision. So is there a tree protection or preservation order? Is it in a conservation area? And what habitats might it be? What species might it be habitat for? And then with that will come permissions, including felling licenses as well, which we explore more in the guide. But there are people who can support you on that. So just to add this little loop, this is a recurring process, essentially. So while you may be able to leave that tree be for the time, as we've already explained, there's likelihood that it might be in a very different state in a year later or in a season later. So yeah, just to consider that, really. Any questions on that people have? No? Cool. Super. So in terms of bringing it back, links sort of flows into monitoring options. Don't worry, there's not another activity. And yeah, it's really just a case of the fact of showing you guys that there are so many options. A lot of them are free from your phone. Ian, if you wanted to provide some examples, I might.
Absolutely. I think most of us have smartphones, don't we, nowadays? So it gives you some really powerful software on there for mapping and for identifying locations. So on that, we have What 3 Words, which is the most recent development. It gives you, I think most people know how to use it. It's easy to remember the locations with the words. But Google Maps is probably the more powerful and can be converted into other types of map, which you can share more widely. Each of those programs can allow you to share that location with contractors, and for or your arboriculturalist, if you wanted to identify a tree, to share that location. But for the most part, you'll be using your kind of on-farm map, or if you're a landowner, you may have your own map and you can mark it in pencil. But for sharing that location, using your phone and sending that by WhatsApp or by email to the person that you might be commissioning to do the works, or maybe checking a tree. So it's a nice, simple way, and it's something that you've got readily available to you. But I think if it just as the last thing, I noticed Excel records is on there. I hope everybody knows how to use Excel spreadsheets. But you can cut and paste the locations into a spreadsheet and give your trees numbers. And it means that you can have at least a discrete reference to work from every time. And it does mean you can actually create a real GIS map from that as well. But that's another thing for another time. I won't bore you with that. But, this shows how powerful these tools are.
Great, I'm sure most of us have heard of some of those. So just going to wrap it up really in sort of the conclusive points. This is really all about maintaining treescapes that exist. So ways of protecting trees is, as we've said, preventing any felling. So can you move the target, people or property? Also reducing tree stress as well. So when they're infected with something, there's likely that they'll be, it's a bit like us, if you're a bit run down, you're more likely to get sick. So other ways we can reduce that stress to increase its strength and resilience to any particular tree health issues. So that's looking at compaction, so work around the tree, whether that's people, machinery, and other forms of stress like water stress as well. And also by adhering to biosecurity measures. So not every single biosecurity problem we're going to have is here yet. There are things that are on the way, not to sound too doom and gloom, but there are also measures that are in place to protect existing trees that we have from potential problems that we might face. So yeah, it's just about being aware of those and adhering to that advice that's out there. And also about replacing trees responsibly going forward. So taking trees from biosecure nurseries, that's where a lot of problems have kind of emerged in the past. So there's lots of regulations on that at the moment. But also making sure that whether it's an agroforestry enterprise or hedges or new woodlands or whatever you might want to go off and do, it's going to be the right tree in the right place for that right reason. And Ross, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, on that, the key message here, of course, is obviously if you're having to remove trees, always look at replacing them. If it's within hedgerows, within woodland, you can't just keep felling trees. So yeah.
And yeah, so I'll just any questions? Perfect.
Hi there. What about blowing air into the roots of the trees? When would that be used as a kind of saving mechanism? And what trees? I just know it's a technique, but I don't know much about it.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we do use air spades, particularly the likes of Myripilus, which we saw earlier. That's really sort of quite a drastic measure. It can do damage to the roots. but it's quite expensive. But you would implement that if you had a really, really high amenity tree. So I'm talking about a big tree in front of someone's big house, where there's no other alternatives of trying to work out how significant the Meripolis is. You've already identified that. And airspades are very, very good. We use them periodically, and sometimes they absolutely go through and there's no roots at all and you have to condemn the tree. Sometimes it's remarkable, even though the association between Meripolis and that beech tree might be 10 years, there's very little damage to it. It works well in a tree that you're going to retain because you've decompacted the ground around it. You can add some biochar or you can add some mycorrhizal powder at the same time as you're doing it. But you wouldn't do it other than a high amenity or high value tree.
So just to elaborate on that, only a small amount. Basically, there's geoinjection. So air spading is one way, which is taking the soil off the top of the roots, removing that compacted soil, getting air onto those roots. Remember, they respire, they breathe like us, so they need air, and they don't get it, and they don't get water if it's compacted. So getting the air spade means that we remove everything. We can put back something which is a better soil, or maybe even wood chip. But there is another method, which is geoinjection, which is where you actually get a pneumatic device, goes into the ground and injects the air direct, which means it gets less destructive, although in the case of Meripolis, you'd want to use an air spade. So thinking about it, there are options, and they're not cheap. They're sort of, could be £750 a day, that kind of thing. But at the same time, if you've got a really key tree, as Ross has said, you want to save it, you've got to spend the money because actually, why not? You know, you're keeping a tree which is worth thousands and thousands of pounds and a lot of heritage, and you know, it's worth spending that money. There's always a justification for it. So those are options in that space.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, in the back. Sorry, thanks, Ross.
Is a landowner always responsible for damage that might be caused by a tree? And I'm thinking, for example, of unhealthy trees which are in danger of falling down or branches dropping off and people trespassing or camping underneath them. You know, where does the liability end?
Knotty problem. Yeah, that's a very long, there may be a long answer to that. I mean, essentially, you know, landowner is responsible. Obviously, there will be a sense of, well, were they aware, as we said earlier? I think, you know, you think about the Occupiers Liability Act was in 1954, so that will be the default for the court to fall back on that and say you are the manager, landowner of that property, you have a tree, you were responsible for it, did you look, are you an expert? If you're not an expert, why didn't you get an expert if you thought there was anything wrong with it? That's essentially the bottom line. There are more complications and we could extrapolate endlessly on different cases. However, that's the position I would take, that it's always, if you know you've got a tree, if you know you've got land, you've got a liability and an asset. So try and manage the liability side by always looking.
It might also be helpful, you own the tree, it's your tree, perhaps think about the word foreseeable rather than liable. So if it's foreseeable, you ought to be considering it.
There's a few points on it in the guide as well, if you need any extra details. But yeah, no, that's a great question that's popped up a little bit today. Any more questions? I know I've got one. No, I've got a quick question for Emma, actually, quickly. Emma Bird. Sort of here today to share any... I was just wondering what there is perhaps for people who want to be planting more trees on farm.
Hello.
Quickly.
Yeah, there we go.
Just a quick one, that'd be great, thanks.
I was just going to make you aware that if anyone is interested in any advice and funding to plant trees on their land to replace those that they have lost, then some tables in here do have a little leaflet on them called Trees for Landowners and Farmers, which outlines some of our offers. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of these for everybody in here, so if you would like some advice, then please come and visit the Woodland Trust stand, which is over in that direction, near the Soil Association one, and speak to one of our advisors, or just get in touch with the Woodland Trust and we can help you out. We've got a small-scale woodland creation scheme, a hedgerow creation scheme, subsidised tree packs, all sorts of different things that can hopefully help you out, because, as was highlighted earlier, it's always good to replace the trees that you've lost with at least one more, if not lots more. Okay, thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you. Just want to say a huge thank you to our amazing facilitators, so Ross, Ian, Peter and Bianca and Elliot as well as Emma. So can I just give everyone a quick round of applause? And also to you guys, this isn't really the most common setup, so thanks for bearing with us and bearing with all the pages that you've got. But yeah, really appreciate all the engagement and all the questions.
Thank you for listening. We'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Sainsbury's, and our other major sponsors, Farmers Weekly Transition, Forestry Commission, and Till Hill, and all the attendees for making this show such an overwhelming success. To get advice and support for your agroforestry project, either visit woodlandtrust.org.uk/plant or soilassociation.org/agroforestry.